I've done this recent translation of Dante's Inferno, which I did because, well, for several reasons, but there's the reason you get started, and then there's the reason you continue. I got started because I read a found poem by Carolyn Bergvall. She had made a poem out of the first 3 lines of 47 translations of Dante's Inferno. And at the top she put the original Italian. And it's a fascinating poem because you see that 47 different people have translated what's really basically very simple Italian. In the middle of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood. The right path had been lost. And yet these 47 translations, there were no 2 translations that were identical. And sitting there reading that, I thought, well, how might I translate those 3 lines? And having 47 translations that were more or less literal, I felt like maybe I would be able to do something even different, because we already had those. One of the other aspects of those translations is that very often they're slightly elevated in tone, or they adhere to the original Italian word order, which is not the same word order as English. And when I would read some translations, I'd think, really, is that a good idea to maintain that Italian word order? And I began to think, what is translation? Are you supposed to put it in the English that you speak, or not? And I realized, or at least I conjectured that a lot of this was meant to gesture to the fact that this was an old poem, so that if you included words like thou'st and canst, it would let you know that this was an old poem. Now, it's not 1300 English, though, so it didn't really, the justification was a little shaky in my mind. So I thought, how would it be if a person put it in contemporary spoken English, and could you do such a thing? But it was also a poem, so I wanted to make it into a poem, and that meant it had to have certain sound patterning. And as you know, most of you, that Dante's Inferno has a very particular sound pattern where there's a rhyme. It's an interlocking rhyme. The poem is arranged in lines of 3, so these triplet stanzas. And the first and the third line rhyme, and then that non-rhyming second line becomes the first and third rhyming lines of the next one, and on and on and on. It's very hard to do that in English because we don't have enough rhyming words, and when people have tried, they end up having to say things that are weird. And I didn't want to do that because I wanted to put it in spoken English. So I thought, well, what is today's, if I'm going to put it in today's spoken English, what's today's poem sound like? And I thought, mostly it's kind of alliteration and assonance and internal rhyme and slant rhyme. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And so I started playing with this, and it turned out to be so much fun that I kept going. And again, I think that, anything you do and you maintain over time, you have to come up with new rationalizations for whatever you do. And one of the continuing things that I decided to do was to make it contemporary in every way. So not just spoken English, not just the sound patterning of contemporary poems, but maybe I could actually put in part of what is in our world. And so every once in a while, when it fit the original, and there had to be some kind of link, I would incorporate something that was contemporary. And the effect of that, I'm hoping, is that hell looks like it's continued from the beginning, and it's still there. And so the people in hell now know about Eric Cartman, or the Rolling Stones, or Dylan. So that's what I did. And I did it for 6 years, and now it's finished. And I'm going to read, actually I'm going to start and read Canto 3. You know that Dante comes to himself in a dark wood, and one way to read the poem is as an allegory of someone who's lost and has an awakening, and then goes on a quest to find himself and to find a kind of spiritual grounding. So he comes to himself in a dark wood, and he decides he's going to take the right path, and he's going to go up this mountain, but he encounters a leopard, and so he runs back, and then he has new resolve, and he goes forward, and he encounters a lion, and he goes back, and then he goes forward, and he encounters a she-wolf, and he goes back, and then he's deciding to give it up, as who wouldn't? So then he sees someone, and he says, "Are you a man or a ghost?" And it turns out it's the Roman poet Virgil. And Virgil says, "I used to be a man, but now I'm a ghost, and I'm here because someone in heaven saw that you were struggling and sent me. And why do you keep turning back? There's happiness if you make your way forward." And so he talks him into going forward, and he says that in order to get yourself out of this mess, you've got to go deeper in, and he's going to take him through hell. So he says he agrees to go with him, and Virgil says to him, "As we go forward from here, it's best if you stay behind me. I'll play the part of your guide. It's my plan to lead you through a place never-ending, i.e. eternal hell, where you'll hear the worst kind of wailing, see the ageless shades writhing in pain, sense their vain request for a second death. After that, you'll see those who are happy in the heat of the fire because they hope at some point to pursue the path to purgatory and so achieve a Bible clerk's bliss. To those, if that's where you would go, up and farther up, you'll need another escort, one more honored than I. When I leave you, I'll leave you with her. The emperor on high says I can't enter his city. I wasn't obedient to his unbendable laws. He says I'm smudged by Adam's ink and so must live in limbo. He reigns in all parts of the empire. His city is there. So is his chair poised at the edge of heaven. Happy are those he asks in. And I said to him, "Poet, I beg of you, by the God you never knew, help me out of this Denmark, which threatens to go from bad to worse. Lead me to where you just mentioned, so I can see the door of purgatory and meet St. Peter at the gate, and along the way, see the dolorous souls who are designated damned." Then he set out, and I at his back. So they start to go forward, but again, Dante begins to have second thoughts. And so Virgil, in order to convince him, tells him how it is that he came to leave Limbo and find him there. And he says that Mary went to St. Lucy, and St. Lucy went and found Beatrice and said, he loved you so when you were alive, you have to do something for him now. So he convinces him again to go forward, and he says, "So I felt myself come back to life like a man on death row to whom it's been said, 'Sorry, we made a terrible error. You're free now.' I said how kind she was to help me, how gracious you were to respond so quickly to the truth of what she told you. You're very eloquent. After hearing you speak, I feel eager to go on. The initial scheme now seems feasible again. Let's go, since we're both of one mind. You'll be my tutor, docent, doctor." That's what I said to him. And then he moved, and I entered the dark wood, the crushing way. And now I'm going to read the entirety of Canto 3, which is my favorite canto because this is, after all this conversation and all of this reluctance, Finally, he begins to see what hell is. And it's very dramatic and it's very overwhelming. So you come at the beginning of this, Dante is looking up at some printed text. And this is what the text reads. Welcome to the city of woe. Welcome to everlasting sadness. Welcome to the grave cave. Justice made the maker build it just like this, with primitive love and bricks of wisdom. If being is power, power created it, i.e., it is. Before this, there was nothing that wasn't eternal, and after, nothing but the eternal. You who have no hope, enter here. These words in soot and all in caps, as if by a hurried hand, were scrawled on the stone overhead above a creaking door. Sir, I said, this is harsh. He spoke like an expert nephew to a drunkard uncle. Now you need to leave behind your fear. Now you need to kill your cowardice. We're where I said we'd come to, the place where you'd see the wretched dead who have lost the aid of their intellect. He touched my hand as if to tell me all would be all right. Then we crossed over from where we'd been into the inner sanctum that houses hidden things. The starless air was echoing with countless sighs, horrific cries, extended loud laments. I was in tears as I listened. The angry accents, the strident utterances, the striking hands, the near-deafening chorus of a million dolls' dark inner voices crying, Mama, 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 veered off walls and swirled around and around like sand in a storm, becomes one with the wind that carries it. And I, circled by horror, said, Sir, what am I hearing? Who are these people, so overcome by grief? He said, this is the inheritance of the contemptible, who did nothing wrong, but nothing right. They blend together with that band of vile angels who didn't rebel, but who also didn't stand with God, but only for themselves in selfishness. To preserve its beauty, heaven threw them out. Deepest hell doesn't want them, since the truly wicked would be able to gloat. We're worse, we're truly depraved. I asked, what torments them? Why do they cry so loud and so unremittingly? He answered, I'll tell you quickly. They wish to die, but cannot. Their blind lives are so empty, so without reprieve. They envy the nothing that an ending would be. They're not meant to be remembered. Mercy turns her back. Justice disdains them. They're not worth our attention. Look, and then let's go. I caught sight of a banner flitting about so restlessly and moving forward so fast it seemed unable to take a stand. It was followed by a sad and endless train of people racing after. Never had I dreamed death had so many sycophants. I saw some I recognized, and then the ghost of one who stood down when faced with doing good and chose instead to be a coward. I knew incontestably this scourge, these despicable cowards, were the enemies of both Jekyll and Hyde. They'd never lived and now would never die. Naked as the day they were born, bitter wasps and hornets covered them. Blood trickled between their tears. This sorry, sticky mixture dripped from their chins to their feet and into the mouths of maggots. Farther on, beyond these, I saw a crowd gathered on the bank of a wide river. I asked my guide, could you please tell me who these are and why they're waiting with such eagerness to board the boat I can barely make out in the distance. He told me, hush, it will all be clear when we reach the bank of the miserable river Acheron. I was afraid I'd annoyed him by asking, so I stared at my feet and stayed quiet until we reached the river. Then out of nowhere, there was an old man with white hair coming toward us in a boat, growling, give it up, you scum uncles. You'll never see the sky again. Like Red Rover, I'm taking you over to the other side, where you'll eat and drink perpetual darkness. Your naked asses will feel the furnace and the ice. and you, with the beating heart, step away from the dead. When I stood my ground, he said, you can't get to where you're going from here. You need the dinghy marked P for purgatory. That one leaves from a different pier. Virgil said, Karen, calm down. We were standing on the ramp. It's been decided where decisions are made. His passport has a stamp. Now leave it alone. The hairy cheeks of the boatman, king of the river rats, went slack. His fire eyes flared, but he kept silent. The weary and naked ones, however, went ashen and gritted their teeth as soon as they heard his vicious speech. They cursed God, their parents, the human race, the moment of their conception, their father's seed, the space between their mother's legs, and the bed where they were made. Then they moved as one, as if conjoined, sobbing all the while along the evil shore that awaits any and all who fail to fear God, where demon Charon, his eyes like hollow furnaces filled with fire, herds them together with a nod, or beckons with a bent finger, smacking the stragglers with his oar. Fall signals the tree to drop its leaves, and it does, one after the other, until the branch looks down and sees a blanket on the ground. Like that, Adam's wicked children leave the shore, one by one, when summoned, the way trained birds come when called with a tin whistle. Then they go over the murky water. Before the boat has landed on the far side, a new group is already huddled, naked on the near. Now, said my teacher, to your earlier question, the ones you see here have died before making amends. They come from every known country. The reason they're so eager to cross the river is that the desire for divine justice prompts them. The very thing they fear is precisely what they want. The good never board the boat, so if Karen curses both your shoes and the dirt beneath your feet, perhaps you now know why. At that, the pitch dark plain shook. Every aspect of that moment is burned into my brain. The cold sweat inside my clothes, the hot wind that rose off the ground wet with tears, the massive crimson camera flash that lit the night scene and turned us red. I lost it and dropped like someone seized by narcoleptic sleep. I don't think there's time to read another canto, so I'll just say that complications ensue, and our hero finds his way to the hopeful edge of purgatory and exits hell to see the stars. And I hope you'll want to read the book. It's an amazing poem. And it reads, I think, once it's put into spoken English, it reads like a novel reads, because there are these very well-developed characters and this wonderful, complicated plot. So I hope you'll read, if not this translation, some of the other translations. There are over 200 in English. So there's something about this poem that others, in addition to myself, have been compelled to spend a lot of time translating. So thank you very much.